I am absolutely thrilled to introduce our guest speaker tonight. He needs no introduction. Last year he got absolutely rave reviews. In fact, one leading commentator who is sitting in one of the tables towards the back, he said that it was the best political speech of the year, no less. So we had to invite him back, and I want you to give him a very warm and generous welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rod Liddle.
Thanks, Simon. That's very kind of you. And thank you very, very much indeed for inviting me back for a second year. It's an enormous privilege and an honour. And thank you, Simon, and all you guys at Forest for continuing to fight for my right to kill myself. How the fuck I wish to. And I remember those long-lost days of being able to have a civilised cigarette in a pub instead of standing outside in the rain, bedraggled like a disconsolate whore. If only we could turn the clock back 10 years. I remember the bash at the Savoy. That was hilarious. I might have mentioned this last year, but what Simon didn't say is that there was this huge room full of the smokers enjoying their last smoke. But one of the other rooms at the Savoy had been booked by, you couldn't make it up, the Society of Thoracic Surgeons. And you could see them walking past the room looking in like this. And, however, but many thanks. It is a huge privilege to have been asked back here. And I'm very, very grateful and very, very honoured indeed. Apart from one thing, it does mean that I have to come into bloody London. Which is less wonderful. I don't like London anymore. And these days, when I'm forced to wade through this sea of diverse and vibrant humanity, I always bring a candle with me, just in case I need to take part in one of your weekly vigils for an atrocity. I've got one with me now in my bag, actually. I might as well light it. I can't find the candle. What I can find is something else I always bring when I'm coming into London, which is sooty. Say hello. Hello. I bring sooty into London because I might need to go to a vigil, and if I'm at the vigil, I might be approached by the idiotic Jon Snow and the Channel 4 news team. And if I'm approached by John 4 and the idiotic Channel 4 news team asking fatuous and asinine questions of me, I can give them sooty instead. So tell me, Sooty, what is your reaction to this latest undefined act of violence? Well, I think we all have to stand together and sing a verse of Imagine, John. Hope not hate. Well, that's absolutely right, Mr. Bear. Yes, indeed. And in this particular attack, several men dressed in black decapitated members of the public while screaming, Allahu Akbar! Can you tell me then, Mr. Bear, what this attack has nothing to do with? Nothing to do with Islam, John. It's nothing to do with Islam. Absolutely, Mr. Bear. And thinking about the many tragedies, the many, many tragedies which have unfolded in this city of late, where do you lay the blame? Theresa May and the homophobic bigots of the DUP, John! Right, say goodnight, Sooty. I have rather grown tired of the... I've rather grown tired of the stand together stuff. And the candles, and all the cant and hypocrisy that goes with it. Increasingly, though, we are indeed constrained to adopt Sooty's responses to the Islamic terrorist outrages which are perpetrated against our citizens and indeed against Muslim citizens. The anodyne and the platitudinous, by which I mean hope, not hate, frankly, I don't think hope's worked too well. Maybe it's time to give hate a bit of a go, but that's just everything. But stuff that is absolutely, utterly meaningless and does not remotely address any of the problems we face. Those vigils, with their candles and the flowers and playing in the background the atrocity playlist, Imagine, Don't Look Back in Anger, and so on. To my mind, it's a form of whistling in the dark, of shielding ourselves and deluding ourselves. And I guess as well, on the part of the authorities, a kind of primitive means of crowd control. To take the other view that these attacks in Manchester and twice in London are indeed something to do with Islam, which incidentally they obviously are, is to be immediately vilified as a racist or an Islamophobe, or both. And further to that, more than that, someone whose views should not be heard. Someone indeed who could even be and possibly should be prosecuted. I mention this because it's very au courant, and if you have any money in your pockets, there's a crowdfunding website set up, which I'll tell you about later, because it's happened to two commentators recently, Douglas Murray and Maajid Nawaz. Douglas is a writer for, among others, The Spectator, and a member of the Henry Jackson Society. Nawaz is a member of the anti-extremist Quilliam organisation and a Muslim. Remember that, he's a Muslim. Both of them were described ludicrously as, quotes, hate preachers, end quotes, for daring to suggest that there might just be something inherent in Islam at present which helps to facilitate the sorts of outrages which we've seen in this country over the last year and particularly recently. Not just hate preachers, mind. They were hate preachers whose views should not be printed or broadcast. That was according to some half-wit from the Muslim Council of Britain. One of my favourite organisations, actually, now I come to think about it. But anyway, that's what you get when you stop being sooty for a bit. And this way, views become constrained. People think that saying what is even patently obvious can no longer be said. Even the mainstream media shy away from tackling this sort of stuff. And to their eternal credit, two blogging sites, our best blogging sites, Guido Fawkes and Spiked Online, keep on top of the whole business. Some of the few people who help us from going completely fucking mad, frankly. Because the doublethink involved is incredible. A horrible attack takes place in Finsbury Park by some deranged Somerset yokel, and Muslim worshippers are both killed and injured. Immediately, within, indeed, 8 minutes, the police define it as an act of terror, although it is not, technically, just racially inspired murder. But they do that instantaneously within, as I say, a wonderful 8 minutes. It took them 4 hours to say the same sort of thing about the London Bridge murders, of course. The BBC and Channel 4 and the Graniad clamber on board with a sort of weird kind of glee and avidity that you wouldn't believe. And then suddenly you hear the very people who would deny that London Bridge and Manchester are anything to do with an ideology are the very ones who load the ideology onto the Finsbury Park attack and blame everyone for it taking place. Douglas Murray was blamed for it taking place. So was Maajid and the media, people with right-wing opinions, people who think immigration needs to be maybe reined in a bit. When that happens, the gloves are off and they are called, all of them, hate preachers, peddlers of hate. This kind of doublethink, as Orwell put it, is kind of unique to our metro liberal left. It's kind of how they live their lives. Take Diane Abbott. Look, I'm sorry. I know some of you are still trying to digest your food. This may be a problem for you because I may indeed in future mention Emily Thornberry. So it's, you know, this is hardcore. Lady Nugent, indeed, yes. Take Diane Abbott and this idea, this sort of double thing. For years, Diane railed against the institution of private schools. But then she sent her brat to one and admitted actually admitted, she said it is unforgivable and unconscionable. Well, yes, it is that, Diane, you cretin. But more than that, there's Emily Thornberry. Lady Nugent, let's give her a proper name. She is Lady Nugent, yes, she is. Emily Thornberry, MP for Islington South, I believe. Sorry, it's getting too much for me, I need a drink. So Lady Nugent, Emily Thornberry, has also railed not only against private schools, but against selective schools, against grammar schools. She doesn't want you to have your kids to have the chance to go to a selective school, a grammar school, because they're bright. But she sent her kids to one. Remarkable. Not only that, but she also railed for years about the policy to sell off old housing association properties. She thought it was immoral and wrong, voted against it, thought people shouldn't be allowed to buy them. Bought one herself. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. She bought one herself. And, you know, I used to think that this was hypocrisy. But it's more than that. It's a kind of weird separation from reality, a kind of sort of schizophrenia, if you like. For Diane and Emily, and so many of the left, there's this stuff in their heads, this sort of a pink marshmallowy stuff. And that's what they believe in. And then some miles distant, there's the real world, where other stuff happens, where reality happens. There's an awful lot of people like that. I've got a friend here tonight, Rob, who is unfortunate enough to live in London. And he can tell you of many, many people, lefties, who voted for Corbyn at the last election and prayed to the Lord Jesus Christ that he wouldn't get in. Now that really is a kind of madness, isn't it? It's a sort of fantasy world. It's where the fantasy world and the real world suddenly collide. Double standards, more double standards. Do you remember Stephen Fry and a whole bunch of others railing about the Winter Olympics being held in Sochi in Russia because of Vladimir Putin's supposed homophobia? I've never taken much of an interest in the Winter Olympics, and nor has most of Britain, actually. It's not a hugely popular event. And at the very moment he was ranting about Russia, the Cricket World Cup, a game we do play a lot of, was getting underway in Bangladesh, where the penalty for same-sex relationships is life imprisonment. In Russia, it's legal. Life imprisonment in Bangladesh. But Bangladesh escapes censure because it's an Islamic country, and the lefties do never wish to be nasty about Islamic countries. More recently, you will have heard them all screeching about the horrible Democratic Unionist Party and their homophobia and how utterly ghastly they are. But again, they make no comment whatsoever about the approach to homosexuality in the Islamic world and within the Muslim communities. That is never mentioned. And listen, there is a difference, you lefties. There is a difference. If you are gay and you want to get married, it may well be that the DUP would be a little bit churlish about decorating your wedding cake. But they're not going to push you off a fucking building, are they? They're not going to stone you to death. They're not going to put you in prison. Do you know, I made this, what seems to me a very, very obvious point, to one of those gibbering snowflakes recently. And he thought about it for a bit and he said, the difference between Islam and the DUP is only really one of degrees. Right, okay. Quite a large number of degrees, isn't it? I'd say somewhere in the region of 180, you know? But sorry, 60. So, thank you. Right. But, you know, people who think that there is an equivalence sort of can't be argued with. It's impossible to debate because the delusion has gripped them so tightly that there's kind of no way through. There is the real world, and then there's the place they inhabit, Planet Thrang. Don't forget, these are the people who decided that something that wasn't a circle could be a circle if it really wanted to be. Let me tell you more about this. I have another prop with me. It's not just sooty tonight. This was a study, and it was done in America. And it was an American experiment seemingly designed to prove the very, very point I've been making. People were shown this shape and asked if it was a circle. Liberals overwhelmingly said yes, because they're inclusive. But it's not a fucking circle, is it? It's not. They got it wrong. And there's nothing you can do about this. There is no arguing. If it wants to be a circle, it could be a circle. It's allied to this separation from reality, of course, is a tendency to consider their opponents not merely wrong, but bad people, scum, evil. You won't let that shape be a circle, you murdering bastard. We've seen an awful lot of that kind of stuff at the moment, the protesters shouting Tory scum, the people insisting that Theresa May is responsible for the murder of those poor people in Grenfell Tower, the shrieked asides at every single turn. One of my favourites, actually, of this sort of this sort of approach came just after the 2015 general election, when unexpectedly for the Liberals, the Conservative Party won. And it was a response from a university lecturer called Rebecca Roach that really cheered me up. She was fab. What she did, she put out a post on social media, and she said, "I am defriending anyone who sends me anything about the Tories." Right, okay. And then she went on, "I've had it up to here. I don't want any Conservative friends. The time for reasoned debate is over." Go on. What subject do you think she lectures in? Yes, she's a philosophy lecturer. You stupid cow. Or, here's one from more recently. This is what I wrote about this quite recently, actually, but it's such good fun. I've got to share it with you again, because it is typical of the way these people behave. The Liberal journalist works for the Grawny ad again, Sophie Heworth, I think that's how you pronounce it, who tweeted recently that she looked forward to the day when all Daily Mail readers were dead. Yep, all 4 million of them. Incredible. I was so shocked, I rang Impress. Now, you guys who don't work in the media, I'll tell you what Impress is. Impress is the new regulatory body funded by Max Mosley, who, if you remember, got upset when people interfered in his sadomasochistic orgies. And so they set up this, with their friends in Hacked Off, they set up this, this regulatory body, which has won approval from the government. Good luck to you, mate. Won approval from the government and will soon be telling us what we can and can't write. So that's Impress. And anyway, so I rang them about Sophie Heworth and tried to get a response to this. It seemed to be something worthy of a response. 3 times I rang, and I just didn't get an answer from them. The person I really wanted to talk to was a chap called Jonathan Heworth, the boss of Impress. Yes, he's Sophie's brother. And I'm afraid we're back with last year's speech to you all, where I talked about my favourite board game, 6 Degrees of Shami Chakrabarti. Because all these fuckers are related to one another. There there is an endless, well, there's actually a small finite number of these people in an endless multitude of quangos and jobs. And so you have Jonathan Heaworth, a former Labour candidate, of course, as you would expect, someone who is a fan of Max Mosley. A former Labour candidate who is boss of Impress. His sister works for The Guardian and wants all Daily Mail readers dead. His wife is the daughter of Polly Toynbee. I mean, they're all there, you know, they're all lined up. And it's very, very common. And it's a separation, again, it's again a separation of reality. I would assume Sophie Heaworth really doesn't think that all Daily Mail readers should die. I mean, it's just a sort of insanity. Another example, I wouldn't be too sure, maybe. A few years back, I argued that if we as a country and as a continent opened our doors to more refugees or supposed refugees from North Africa, many more would die in the seas attempting to come here. This is exactly what has happened. More people have died. Something like fourfold have died because Europe has said we must let more people in, so more have tried to make the crossing, more people have been killed. But the shrieking when I made this point was remarkable. As someone said, racist. The shrieking was remarkable. These people are human beings, it was shouted at me. Simon Sharma screeched at me the gravest insult he could find, which was that I was suburban. And had a real go at me, and his hands were waving around like a demented marionette with Parkinson's disease. And yet that is exactly, it's separation of what is actually happening with what goes on in their minds. It may be that Simon and the rest of the lefties wanted to feel good about themselves by saying we should allow more refugees in. What that has done is kill more refugees. The doublethink then, and the demonisation of opponents, is on the surface quite funny, even profitable. Christ, it keeps me in work, I'm telling you. But it does serve to close down the debate, so that real issues are very difficult to discuss. Suddenly, perfectly sensible things become unsayable, such as this is not a circle. The time has come, ladies and gentlemen, I think, to decapitate Sooty. Thank you.